Welcome to Seekers and Finders, the podcast where we explore the infinite pathways to truth, creativity, and connection.
There were some parts of the Urantia book where I felt it was a very traditional role of a woman, right? Like Robert said, they're really big on family and very big on roles, right? So the mother's role was to be nurturing and to cook and pretty much to stay home. And as a woman who, well, I do cook a little bit now, but who at the time, I didn't grow up, I didn't cook anything. I worked full time. So there was a little bit of a hey, wait a minute. But then again, I just said, well, that's the time that it was written. And for the people on this planet to understand, it had to be written in something that we could understand. So I didn't really feel slighted, just, hey, if it was written today, maybe it would have been done a little bit differently. Because there's so much other good stuff in it where it doesn't matter if you're a man, you're a woman, you're gay, you're a transvestite. None of that matters. It's what's in here in the mystery monitor and, the good things that you can do regardless of your sex. And yeah, sure, one of them is raising kids, but the dad can raise the kids too. So
I never,
no problem.
I never felt that the divine feminine. Of course, it's a nurturing aspect, and I think that's the important thing that we have to remember about that. It's not regulating women to anything. It's just the divine feminine is a nurturing concept that we should all believe in and trust in as part of the human experience. But that's just my take on it.
But anybody can be nurturing.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that it's more of, for lack of a better term, it's more appealing coming from a feminine nature.
Again, and as a woman, I've never been a man, so I don't know that.
I didn't say that.
No, I know. It's just an interesting perspective that we could be very different just based on what we've been taught and, who we are as people.
Okay.
Well, I have to say, this is a beautiful lead-in.
Okay, good.
So today on the Seekers and Finders podcast, we have two good friends of mine, Robert Fusco, Caren Horowitz, and we're here to talk about the Urantia book.
So, Gary, let's get started with, I know Caren and Robert were on your radio show, and this is about a week or so ago, so you were thoroughly questioned by Mr. Falk. And I'm actually going to ask you, because I listened to the show, but I want to bring this back up again, how the Urantia book personally affected each one of your spiritual lives. Now, we just want to set the stage here for our listeners. You can first tell us how you got into the book. We want to make a note that you are purveyors of the book, not necessarily experts in the Urantia concept. Is that right? So in other words, there are people that may have dived so deep into the book that they know every single answer and they may want to question some of the things you might say. So for those viewers out there who are deep Urantia people, we're just going to say the two of you got into the book. It's part of your life now, and you're going to express yourselves how the book affected you. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Robert, is that fair enough?
Sure. I would definitely go along with that basic MO for this situation. in my meetings with other Urantia readers, it never got down and dirty to that extent. What it did was is that everybody appeared to talk to one another in what can only be described as an enlightened sense. An enlightened sense that was brought on by the spirituality that they gained from whatever parts or the whole book that they have read. And they used that as an idea of talking. So there was never a push and shove kind of situation. Everything was on an acceptance level. The fact that you were understanding and reading the Urantia book made one open to the endless possibilities that the Urantia book gave them in terms of what they thought about their spirituality. Did they understand everything? No, I don't think so. But what the Urantia book did do is give them the confidence to be able to speak in a manner that they knew was a more spiritual and a more knowledgeable kind of situation. I
And
don't
I
know
Yeah.
if
want to yeah, that was good, Robert. And I want to throw something in because, uh, first of all, before we get too far, afoot, we want to tell people what who may not forget about the experts in the Urantia book. There are people who don't even know what it is. We're going to give an overview and tell them what it is. But I just want to add one thing to what Robert's saying because it's very important. That in my 5 years of being involved in the Urantia movement, I guess in the early or mid 80s, I never encountered any kind of one-upmanship or hierarchy in the movement. There was no experts and non-experts. Everybody was coming from a place of authenticity. And if some people had a deeper understanding, just like in any spiritual venue, some people are going to have a deeper understanding than other people, but that was never part of the dynamic. It was always like this. And that's the one thing that I really appreciated about the Urantia book movement and the people I met at conferences and study groups. There was never any sense of like, like holier than thou. So I wanted to make that point. But I think we should kick off with what is the Urantia book, and for people who may be hearing about the Urantia book for the very first time right now. So Robert or Karen, tell us what the Urantia book is, and give us a little background. Then we'll delve into more our own experience with it.
well, the that's it's the Urantia book is a um, uh, perhaps the Bible written by extraterrestrials. It is an open-minded. It is an apocalyptic revelation. Okay, the Urantia book comes across to those who haven't read it before as some kind of futuristic encyclopedia of theology, of cosmology, spiritual science, religion, philosophy, and of course the history of this planet. When I first came across this book, which was when I moved into this particular house, was the only book on my bookshelf, and I opened it up, it took me right in. So, and the more important thing is that the latter part of the book was the explanation as it moved Gary so much, the hidden life of Jesus and the history of this Urantia planet. So that's basically what it is. It also came at a very unusual time. The Urantia book is actually the fifth revelation. We have had four others that come out through the decades, but this was the most important one. It came in, we were starting getting the idea of this in the 1930s, 1933, after World War One. By the time it was all put together and put into book form, it was 1955, the end of World War II. What am I saying basically? Is that the Celestials, who knew that this planet was in deep, deep trouble with the two world wars, acted as parents to us and gave this revelation that we needed desperately at this time. Because after the two world wars, we were leaning towards violence and all kinds of situations. It was time for this revelation to be brought upon us. And it slowly has growing and growing. And thanks to the internet, it's even growing even more.
Robert, hold up the book so people can get a sense.
Coverage.
It's a 2,000
It's
page book.
2,096 pages.
Hold up.
Do not be undaunted by that, because you can read it in stages, and it can become part of you. As soon as you read it, I don't know what it is. I'm speaking for myself, and I think perhaps for Gary, something just clicks, something that sort of makes sense. Now, I was raised a Roman Catholic. I went to parochial school. I felt that the Bible distorted things to me. I don't know where that came from, but that's where it came from. When I started reading the Urantia book, I felt more, for lack of a better term, complete in learning about that spirituality that I know could exist. It also goes hand in hand with the vast universe. It goes hand in hand with how you feel inside. It goes hand in hand with science as well. There's a large part of the Urantia book dealing with science, earthbound and in outer space. So all these things combined make the Urantia book a very unique and certainly a very spiritual and mental revelation that mankind is in desperate need of to this day.
Karen, what about
Yeah.
you? What gives a little bit of your background with the Urantia book and how
Sure.
you got, we know how Robert he moved into a house and it was there. So how did you discover it?
So I discovered the book through Robert, picking it up and beginning to read. I think the first thing that crosses your mind is not spiritual at all. The first thing you think about is, how am I ever going to read this thing, right? 2,000
2,000
pages,
pages.
small print. And as you start reading it, if you think you have to go cover to cover, which initially I may have thought, it appears to be a really long work of science fiction, because it is so wild and the ideas are so crazy, just to a novice, just a person coming into it. What I think really appealed to me was when I spoke with Robert and he told me I didn't have to read it cover to cover. I could just go to the sections that interested me. And like probably every other human being on the planet, there's a section, and a large section, that tells us what happens after we die, right? So who doesn't want to read a book that's going to tell us what happens after we die? And that's how I would explain it to a novice. It has history and spirituality and creation and the life of Jesus. But if you just want to pick it up and go to that section that says, hey, what the heck happens when we die? Wherever you want to start is a good start.
Well, you liked it. You liked it, Karen, when I told you about when we're talking about your dad.
Yeah, and
And I
in the
said, your dad is where he's supposed
right. In the beginning, how I decided to read it, even though I knew that Robert had it, but we were taking a walk in the park and it was Father's Day, and I was feeling bad because, my father had passed, many years before, but still it was Father's Day. And I was talking to Robert and he said to me, your dad is where he should be. And then he said that his dad was where he should be and that everyone was kind of where they should be. And he explained a little bit about how they didn't die, right? They moved to a different place, to a different form. Maybe they were already awakened, maybe they weren't. But it was an interesting and a good feeling to me. It definitely was a spiritual feeling to me. Hey, dad's where he should be. So who am I to, be sad that he's gone? They say a better place, which I'm sure that it is, which isn't saying much these days, but that's what made me not only, hey, he's got this book, it's so big, I've never touched that. It was like, maybe I'll give this a peek. And then it kind of blossomed from there.
Let me ask you this, because I think people probably want to know where this book came from. Who channeled it? How did it manifest itself in the book form?
It manifested itself primarily through channeling. When the Celestials decided that they had to reveal this text to us in some way, it had to be channeled through a human. The human that it was channeled through was never revealed. Now, at the time, the Sadler family, the William Sadler family, William Sadler, by the way, was a big skeptic on channeling. He went around the world defeating anybody that would challenge or was channeling any kind of information from a spiritual or from any other kind of other world. That's what he did. When this person who had nothing to do with religion and spirituality and was working in the Chicago financial market, whose identity was never revealed, was starting to have these sleep concepts and speaking stuff and handwriting that was not in his handwriting. They brought this individual to the Sadlers because the Sadlers, Dr. William Sadler, was a very skeptic to channeling. And he wanted to debunk this and all that, but he could not after a while. The channeling kept continuing. It appeared in chapters. When it started to happen, the Urantia Commission that was formed in the Sadlers put together questions. They put these questions on a sheet of paper. This person who was sleeping went home. The next morning, there was paper stacked this high, not in his handwriting. So he was channeling this stuff. And it took him 20 years to correlate it into book form, which is what we have today. So it was the celestials speaking through a human to give us this information.
Okay.
Also, I'm sure people watching the podcast, many of them are much more familiar with A Course in Miracles than they are with the Urantia book. So it's similar to how the Course in Miracles came through. In other words, there was a human contact. Her name was Helen Schuckman, and then supposedly the revelation came down from Jesus to Helen. She typed it out. It's the same idea. So there's a human contact in Chicago, and he's getting these messages from these higher beings. It's the same kind of writing down the thing. So it's the same type of process.
Well, how did Moses get the 10 Commandments?
He went up to the mountain.
Yeah. And they were burned into the stone.
This is primarily a Western Christian ethic book, which conveys mostly about Jesus. It doesn't talk about Buddha,
Oh, yes, it
Krishna. It does.
It
Oh, yeah.
does. Now hold on.
Okay.
The basic idea is Christianity, but it does cover all religions. There's a whole section on the religions of this planet. Yes.
It goes into the Buddhist teaching, the Hindu teachings very extensively in the section devoted to the history of this planet, which, by the way, we call it Earth. The people who are revealing this, it's called Urantia. That's what the book comes from. Urantia means Earth, but there's a whole section that goes very deeply into Hindu, Buddhist, Zoroastrian, all the religions of the world.
Okay, so my next question, since I'm not really familiar with the book except hearing about it for most of my spiritual journeys, is there a spiritual practice involved, or is it just a mind construct that one believes in? What kind of spiritual experiences have you had that, for example, Gary and I both were involved with a spiritual master. We studied meditation. Gary's gone on to other modalities. I've stayed with the meditation thing and have had visceral experiences through it. Does this book offer any practice that will bring you to a greater state of enlightenment, beside just the mental construct that it tells you this is the way it is, so believe it because this is what's going to happen? Have you had any visceral spiritual experiences through reading this book?
Yeah, the visceral experiences that I can tell you about. We are born, and then at 6 or 7 years of age, we have indwelled in us a fragment of God that they call either the thought adjuster or the mystery monitor. This is a part of your part of your inner psyche that can guide you to a certain extent, even though you can't hear the voices speaking towards you, towards any decisions and things that you may wish to relish. You meditate, Stefan. That's part of it. That's part of what the mystery monitor is doing. It's guiding you towards that meditation to achieve a different spirituality. Whether or not it's going to guide you to fully understand the Urantia book is beyond the point. What the point is that it spiritually guides you in the right direction. For me personally, my mystery monitor has got me involved in the book. Did anything viscerally happening to me? I can't say that for certain. What I can say is that I feel more confident about my spirituality. I feel more confident what's going to happen to me. I feel more confident what's happened to people that I've known and loved and that have passed on. Yes, that I fully understand and become confident. That to me is the most precious gift that this Urantia book can give me and can give to mankind in general. But that's just my personal thing. Did an angel come down and speak to me? No, I can't really say that. Has they spoken within me without necessarily in a quiet meditative sense? Not yes, that has happened to me. But what I'm saying to you is that the concepts in this book lead me to believe that we are part of a much greater process as humans. And as a result of that, that can't help but lift me spiritually and give me confidence for the rest of my days.
So it's intoned peace in you.
I'm sorry?
It's intoned peace in your
Yes.
being.
And a confidence. Yes. Hmm.
Right.
And
And the ability to make better decisions on a spiritual level.
so the inspiration alone that you both get from this book is a driving force in your lives, correct?
Certainly a meditative one. Certainly. Yes.
Karen,
Yeah.
have you had any? Go ahead.
Let me answer that for you a little bit. It's been a bit, probably a little bit more mundane for me. Uh, and I think sometimes it just justifies probably what you're already doing. But the one thing that I think I heard reading it, and I had taken some online classes about it, is exactly what we're doing here, to let people know that it exists, right? That's a real tangible thing and a practice that we can use. I remember speaking to someone, who was a Christian and just talking about the book, and they felt inspired enough to look it up. At least they said they did. I don't know if they did. So I think one teaching is, hey, we should spread this word. I mean, and when you think about it, that's what Jesus was all about, was spreading the word. So that is the one kind of tangible thing. The other thing that I touch on again is we all want to know what happens when we die. And from the time I learned about death, I have had a big fear of that. So reading this book and experiencing things that make you feel it's not just this big work of science fiction, that this is real, it came from other worldly beings and angels, it certainly alleviates a lot of that fear, at least for me. So a couple tangible things that it did for me.
Okay, so um, you know, Dr. Brian Weiss wrote a book about his patients, and through therapy, through hypnosis that he gave them, they discussed their past incarnations. Michael Newton, another psychologist on the West Coast, um, did basically the same thing. And his patients, when they went under hypnosis, talked about what it was like in between incarnations, what it was like in the inner worlds. Now we have the NDEs, the near death experiences, where people basically talk about what happened when they died for however long it was, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. And most of them had the same kind of experience, although because of their belief systems, they met who they thought
Yeah.
was supposedly when they went into the higher worlds or inner worlds. So, with that said, are the death experiences in the Urantia book similar? Do they take a totally different tract on this?
There's no reincarnation in the Urantia book. When you're done here on this planet, on Urantia, you're done here. your mystery monitor retains the knowledge of things that might be useful to you in your next incarnation. But your incarnation is not on Earth. Okay, you're already someplace else, and there's several other forms that you will be taking as you get more and more spiritual and more close to God. But again, you're not going to reincarnate on Earth, but you will retain some of the information that was deemed useful to you because the mystery monitor saves that for you. And that's a whole other topic and a whole other show, okay, we're dead, we wake up, then what happens? Because it's a whole spiritual career, so to speak, but we're not coming back here.
Well,
Let me,
I
and let me also add, Stefan,
yeah.
because it's very important about this reincarnation thing. We are sometimes blessed when we are born to receive the mystery monitor at age 6 or at age reason, or the age that we may start to make moral decisions. This mystery monitor also could have been part of another soul or another ascending mortal, so to speak. So we're receiving those kind of images from another person that ascended. That's why you might feel, I've had a previous life.
Yeah.
That's because you're receiving those images that mystery monitor has maintained in the individual before you. So when we talk about reincarnation or hypnotized, and I was in World War II, or I was in the Crimean War, or I was here, or I was fighting the Indians. You are retaining the thoughts from a previous person that mystery monitor was a part of, and has since departed the planet and has gone on to be inside of you.
So in other words, um, what I understand is that, from my point of view, um, we have a soul that animates this physical form on Earth. I don't know if the Urantia book talks about a soul, but that soul incarnates into different beings, which means Stefan, like this, isn't going to be like this the next time or was like this before. But the soul of this entity that has incarnated into this body takes on other forms, other people, and has remembrances from that. So, in other words, I know, or I believe, let's say that, I believe that after I pass on and will be incarnated into whatever, another multi-universe or whatever, that the consciousness that I retain through all of these lives will be remembered, not as necessarily in this form, but as the soul that is the essence of who all of these lives are. Now, does the Urantia book talk about the soul in that way?
Basically, you're saying it in a nutshell. Are you familiar with symbionts in the TV series Star Trek?
Yes.
Okay. When they get a symbiont, they retain the memories of where that symbiont was previously. So basically, we're dealing with that same kind of concept with the mystery monitors. So what you have just said, Stefan, is exactly right in the nutshell. You've got the basic ideas. And that's where that comes from. And that's where that concept of reincarnation could come from. It's not really you reincarnated, it's you being part and retaining the memories of someone else.
Right. And it can explain a lot of things that happen to you in life, but at the same time, don't think that this happens to everybody and that we can get in touch with, the mystery monitors and what it's retained from people. As you even said, well, they had to hypnotize these people deeply to grasp it. So most of us are never going to have that. We might have a feeling, wow, I know I've never been here, but it looks familiar, right? And this could be something that might explain it. But for most of us, we're not going to know who that piece of God was in previous to us.
So, Caren, tell us what it's like after you die.
You need to read the book.
Oh no, that's why you're here.
Well, I'm here to spread the
So
word, right? You want to know, you're going to have to read the book.
yeah,
I'm doing my job here.
let's be
uh,
honest, Stefan. The Bible mentions the mansion worlds. The Urantia book is big on the 7 mansion worlds where we go after we die. that really is another. We could spend hours on that, basically. But basically, the idea is that we elevate ourselves through the different phases of the mansion worlds, each one bringing us closer to the spirituality that we would eventually achieve.
In general,
Yes.
in general, what the Urantia book says, and
Mhm.
the Urantia book is very clear and very specific, and as Karen has alluded to, and Robert, the Urantia book says there's no such thing as reincarnation in terms of coming back to Earth. What happens when you die, you graduate from this planet and you go to another, perhaps planet in on a different level of evolution. And the whole idea is we're here to get. I'm giving you the point of view of the Urantia book now. We're here for experience. So when we have this experience, we die, we go to the next class, so to speak. You go from first grade to second grade, and it goes like that. As you progress through different lifetimes, and you finally ascend to some. I don't know where it all ends. You merge with God or whatever. But I'm saying you don't come back here, but you go to different classrooms. That's
And you're in different forms. You don't retain this form. And each time you get to a different level, the form actually changes until I believe, there's really no form. You're
right.
at one with
Right.
everything.
It's a question of going from the material to
Yeah.
and more less material, more spiritual. And you go on up until then it's just all spiritual. That's the general.
Yeah. Yep. And there's tasks that if you haven't done them here on Earth, you may have to accomplish, like you heard in the radio show that Gary didn't have children, so he may have to put in some work in the nursery on one of the worlds.
So is there a God?
Yes.
Most certainly.
And this is the main source that's passing on this information?
The idea is that one of the fundamental basics of the Urantia book is that God is such an incredibly large concept and so big and so broad. And the man and man's mind is so finite. It's sort of like this funnel coming down and coming down. So our concept of God is probably not 1/10 or even 1/millionth of what the whole concept of God really is. And as a result of that, we are basically all his children, and he wants us, and he puts forth the idea. That's what the mansion world's all about. We slowly become uh, more spiritual in that sense, but that can't happen like that. It's got to be a gradual process. We have to leave this human existence and become much more spiritual. And that's how it becomes through the different mansion worlds. And we learn lessons as we do all that. So yes, there is a God.
One of the things that grabbed me about the Urantia book, there's a big section on the God concept because
First source and
people from every stage of human development have conceived of God in a certain way, and this is where kind of Jesus came in a very key area. But I'm just saying it deals with the concept of God and how different people, different cultures envision God in a certain way, and it's all conceptual until it's not anymore. But I'm saying, so there's a whole section on the God concept. But actually, the Urantia book is based on the idea that, of course, there's of God. I mean, it's a
Right.
revelation of God, just like the Bible is the revelation of God. In other words, it's certainly it's all about God.
So, Robert, you talked about this God in the masculine. What happened to the divine feminine? I mean, is there an explanation about
there is
the yin in this whole thing?
there is a God concept. There is a mother spirit that exists as well. And there and the creator sons of which Jesus was one. So there is that parental spiritualness that exists uh, 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 out there and becomes all part of it. So it's not just a God thing. It's God is like a trinity, and the conceptuals of God that we have formulate a male and a female and a father and a mother spirit. So they're all part of it. So it's not the guy with the beard sitting on the throne. It's it's a conceptual feeling of parents that is basically God.
So in Hinduism, there's also a trinity, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering what it talks about in reference to Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu.
Well, like I say, there is a whole section on the religions of the planet. And what they do is they all conceptual. This symbol, by the way, and this symbol is the trilogy. That's why there's three concentric circles. So we're dealing with that constantly. That's the Urantia symbol. So we have that Trinity concept. We have the mother and the father and the son. So that Trinity concept basically is shown throughout most of the world's religions. Even Roman Catholics have the Trinity. And you just mentioned that they have the trilogy.
So, Karen, do you have a different take on that? I'm looking for the feminine aspect to uh, come forth here because it seems very masculine at the moment, and there we have evolved into humanity as a patriarchy at this very moment, but the divine feminine is trying to break through so much, and since we are Mother Earth, Mother Nature, uh, uh, all of creation is based upon the feminine creating the world. How do you see it?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I would have to agree with you. As a woman, there are definitely parts of the Urantia book that seem a little bit dated. Uh, the woman's place is still, raising children and in the home and being the caretaker. But I also have to believe, if I believe this book, that it was written so that it could be accepted by people on this particular planet. It talks about races on other planets, other types of people where they're more enlightened. And I would have to think on those planets, maybe they don't have that idea of the trilogy. Maybe a being is a being. So what you're saying is important, but I think if you keep reading, you get a much better understanding. But I do remember on first seeing some of this stuff that it was like, yeah, this sounds like, Leave It to Beaver and the 1950s concept. But like anything, I'm sure it was intended for its audience to understand. And there's a lot of it that, even though it's written down, we still can't understand it because it's so complex. But to get the idea that you're saying from it, it does seem aimed as a patriarchy. Yeah.
So you seem very pragmatic about it, which I think is a good thing because, taking everything at face value sometimes can be a little daring. But you have your own inner spark going on here. Do you have moments?
That's great because they also call the mystery monitor your spark.
Okay.
So you
Talk
just
about
talked right to it.
So do you take the entire book? I am assuming at this point you've read all or most of it. Do you take the entire book at face value, or do you question some of the things and use your intuitive self to formalize what's really going on here as far as the story? Because the story is just that. It's a story. And I'll be honest, a dear friend of mine in 2009 wrote a series of books that's very similar to the Urantia book. He channeled them all, and I was immediately struck by them. And what was interesting about it is, and I'm sure this happened to you, in reading the 300-page manuscript before it was actually in book form, it took me a weekend to just read it, and it was so inspiring. Every word that I heard just struck such a chord inside me. And then what happened is, after the initial burst of inspiration, my intuition started to work its way through the teachings, we'll call them, and um, be able to identify what was for me and
Mhm.
what wasn't for me, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way to put it. And as a logical person, I certainly went out and read what all of the skeptics had to say about the book. And Robert and I were talking about this earlier, that there's things in the book that existed previously. Well, yeah, if it really happened, things have been passed on, right? Knowledge gets passed on through generations and generations. So you can go out and look at those things and then kind of debunk the debunkers. But yeah, you can go into this book and pick and choose and try and understand the frame of mind when it was written. And they didn't think we would have the frame of mind to even get this fifth revelation right until the 50s, even though it started writing in the 30s. So I think that our planet wasn't ready until then. And I have to think that if they came down and wrote it today, maybe they would do things a little differently concerning women, just so it was right for the population and what was happening at that time.
So there might be a little bias just based upon the fact that it was channeled through a human, even though the handwriting didn't look like his and he was asleep when this was all channeled. Uh, there's a bias on every one of these channelers. The bias is the person that's channeling him. Bashar, the human that's channeling Bashar, the Seth books. All of these different books seem to have some kind of a different take, and that take seems to be the bias that the human being who's channeling him is bringing forth, even though that person is saying, I have nothing to do with this. This is
Right.
just a voice coming through me. But,
Right. And we don't know who that person was. And
right.
now we're saying, well, it was probably a man, right? But we don't know that. The book itself probably would not agree with that, but you can see where it could happen. Or with these beings saying, hey, write this in a manner that the people on your ranch will understand it. Here's the concept, make them understand it. So there certainly could have been some of that bias put in there.
Let me
So,
let me let me push back on all that bias. Okay, I believe, because of the earthly concept and even the concept of the universe, yes, that we are children of parents. That's a male and female. The concept of a father, son, and a mother earth is not harmful to me. I don't agree that the Urantia book puts forth a leave it to beaver mentality. I really don't. I really believe that there should be a father spirit, and a mother spirit. I think that manifests itself in the Urantia pages, and not any kind of archaic kind of way that goes back to the Urantia book is big on family. They're big on the idea of a mother and a father and the whole concept of it. So I think that the female divinity comes through all the time. I really do. There's a father spirit and there's a mother spirit. And I think that's all part of it. So I think the feminine divine makes itself more than known.
can you
Yeah, I
explain it
wasn't arguing
more?
that it wasn't didn't make itself known, just that if you read the book cover to cover as a woman, you're probably going to read some things that say, "Hey, wait a minute, my only job isn't just to, bear children and raise those children."
I want to make one point as far as the human bias goes. According to the Urantia book, the and it's clear it was a man. The contact person on Earth was chosen simply because he was completely disinterested in all this stuff and therefore would not have a bias. So they're very big on that particular point, that this guy was chosen because he had no interest whatsoever, he had no agenda to push, so he wouldn't have a bias. So I kind of, that resonates with me.
So,
I don't think the Celestials that did all this had a bias.
well, not the celestials. I'm talking about just having it coming through a human being, that it takes on that human being's voice in a way. But what you're saying, Gary, is this person was more like a microphone than
Completely neutral. They said that's why he was chosen because he wasn't an advocate of any particular blah 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 religion. He was disinterested, so he was a clear, quote unquote, clear channel. That's what the Urantia book
I
says.
believe he worked in the financial district, so he was more or less a materialistic kind of individual.
Is there any specifics that you can give us out of the book? I mean, you talked about going to another, after you die, you won't be uh, incarnated back into Earth. You'll go to another planet or something. Is there any specifics that we can talk about here to give the audience, a view of what the book is actually saying?
What you were asking was for something specific. So Robert touched on this when we had the radio show about when we die, we wake up normally with many, 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 many other, we'll say people for now, who had kind of been sleeping and waiting for this awakening because it happens on a regular schedule, or some people who have really completed a lot of the things they should here on Earth and know the Urantia book and are spiritual might wake up sooner than the others. And I'm going to give it to you, Robert, but just to describe what happens when you wake up.
We could wake up with people that died hundreds of years ago. I could wake up at the same time that my parents have woken up. Every night we crawl into bed. We put covers over ourselves. We close our eyes. We fall asleep, thinking that we're going to wake up. Is dying the same way? And when we do wake up, are we going to be waking up with the people that died 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago or hundreds of years ago? Depends on the dispensation and the scheduled judgments that supposedly are in the resurrection hall. So it's an interesting idea. So
And then when we wake up, we have that certain amount of time to kind of look up other people before we go on our first mission. That's what I thought you
have 10
could
days of
describe.
leisure time.
What are the missions?
Well, they graduate as you go up to the mansion worlds. You're doing different things to become more spiritual. So you're learning different things. After all, there's a lot to learn out there, Stefan. We have no idea really what's out there. We would have been more enlightened, okay, if we did not have the Lucifer rebellion. We all heard about that famous thing, the God and the devil fighting, he cast down. That's all baloney. But what did happen is that the Lucifer rebellion cut Urantia off, as well as many other planets off of the celestial transmissions. If we didn't have that, we'd be much further advanced. But we're lucky in a way because we're at the bottom rung of the ladder. So that means that when we spiritually rise step by step, we become more attuned with how important that spirituality is.
And everyone's journey can be different. It's not that we have to go to this world, this world, this world, and do this, this, and this. If we have certain abilities, then those abilities might be used. We might stop in our journey, and if we're good at, teaching something that needs to be taught, we could change into that role. So there's many different roles, and the journey is going to be different based upon your individual needs or your individual talents.
So did they talk about any humans on Earth that are already enlightened before they left the body, before they died, besides Jesus? I mean, we have these Indian sages that sit in caves for most of their lives and achieve a certain kind of transcendence. Do they talk about enlightenment in the same way on Earth?
There was Enoch who went up in a chariot of fire. There is that. There is that idea. There is an idea of being able to be a first fuser, which is, if you can, what you're talking about, Stefan, people that can transcend themselves beforehand, but it hasn't really manifested itself in any kind of real way that we can classify as something that would be viably spiritual for us.
So there's no hope for us until we leave the body?
Is what?
There's no hope for us until we leave the body?
There's always hope. I had hope because I read the book. That's my hope.
I
Yeah.
saw Gary shaking his head before when
Yeah,
I asked the question.
yeah, I'm shaking my head because you asked a question about enlightenment, and no, no, no. The Urantia book, there's none of this, this idea of you're becoming enlightened in this lifetime, and you become like a Ramana Maharshi or a Nisargadatta or a Ramakrishna. And I combed, the section on Jesus. 1,000 pages. I combed that. I read that whole thing 3 times to look for what does Jesus say about enlightenment? Nothing. So if you're looking for enlightenment, do not go to the Urantia book. Go to the Eastern teachings, and you could pick up stuff there. But when it comes to the teachings of the Urantia book and Jesus, there's no idea of enlightenment. It's just not there in the book, in the Urantia.
And what
Yeah,
about love?
but the book motivates you towards enlightenment.
Okay. But what about the concept of divine love?
Jesus, the 1,000 pages of the life of Jesus is all about unconditional divine love because that's what Jesus was all about. So you got 1,000 pages of that, no pages about enlightenment in the Urantia book.
So it is primarily more geared to a Western philosophical mind of Christianity.
Well, I want Robert and Karen to address it, but I'll say the answer to that is basically yes, although it purports to be all inclusive. But yeah, it's more yeah. If somebody I don't know somebody who's geared into the whole Eastern thing, I don't know how they would react to it. What do you guys think?
I would push back on that enlightenment remark, Gary. I really would. I'm let's, what does enlightenment mean to any individual? What does that mean? I mean, the reading of the book and seeing how it can manifest itself in certain ways, it certainly is enlightening in terms, and certainly inspires one to be more enlightened by the very fact of the text that's contained within it. You mentioned the Jesus thing. The Jesus part explains every year of Jesus's life. If that isn't enlightening to you, I don't know what would be.
I think maybe,
It's
at
a
least
different.
that's
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
speaking for me, I have not studied Eastern religions, and I probably don't know what you're meaning when you say the word enlightened. So if you're saying it's something that's not in the Urantia book, I
So,
believe you. I was raised as a Jew culturally, but we really had no religion. So I was kind of an open book here.
so what I'm talking about is, as they refer to, seeing through this veil of illusion, which is how we live on this earth. And this veil of illusion is the masking of the soul when it enters the body, so it doesn't remember what its life in that divine state in the higher worlds was like. And now, based on the fact that we're individuated and have this ego that centralizes in the I position, that we're so focused on ourselves, this enlightenment is a way of seeing through this illusion or delusional state that we're in and seeing what is not only the real thing that's going on, but beyond all of the concepts into a state of oneness, which is where the soul supposedly eventually ends up. That's what I'm talking about as far as enlightenment.
Right.
But
Well,
then,
we haven't seen anything yet because we haven't died and gone to that first world. So we don't have the need for a veil to kind of shield us from that. I think we've all had times where, we've had that aha moment. Wait a minute, I can see something here that isn't what it's purported to be, and perhaps that's your mystery monitor kind of helping you out. But I don't really think we have that concept of being able to achieve that oneness here on Earth.
And
Okay.
then there's the age-old question of good old-fashioned faith. All these concepts that even all of us here are talking about is based on a faith system that each one of us holds individually. You have yours, Stefan. Karen has hers. I have mine. Gary has his. So that's basically what it is. It's knowledge of the unknown. That's the faith part of it that we have.
There were some parts of the Urantia book where I felt it was a very traditional role of a woman, right? Like Robert said, they're really big on family and very big on roles, right? So the mother's role was to be nurturing and to cook and pretty much to stay home. And as a woman who, well, I do cook a little bit now, but who at the time, I didn't grow up, I didn't cook anything. I worked full time. So there was a little bit of a hey, wait a minute. But then again, I just said, well, that's the time that it was written. And for the people on this planet to understand, it had to be written in something that we could understand. So I didn't really feel slighted, just, hey, if it was written today, maybe it would have been done a little bit differently because there's so much other good stuff in it where it doesn't matter if you're a man, you're a woman, you're gay, you're a transvestite. None of that matters. It's what's in here in the mystery monitor and the good things that you can do regardless of your sex. And yeah, sure, one of them is raising kids, but the dad can raise the kids too.
But
So no problem.
I never felt that the divine feminine. Of course, it's a nurturing aspect. And I think that's the important thing that we have to remember about that. It's not regulating women to anything. It's just the divine feminine is a nurturing concept that we should all believe in and trust in as part of the human experience. But that's just my take on it.
But anybody can be nurturing.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that it's more of, for lack of a better term, it's more appealing coming from a feminine nature. Again,
And as a woman, I've
I
never
didn't
been
say
a man, so I don't know that.
I didn't say that a
No,
man
I
could be
know.
nurtured.
It's just an interesting perspective that we could be very different just based on what we've been taught and, who we are as people.
Well, thank you very much for coming and joining us on the live screen.
Yeah, and nice to meet you.
My
Same
pleasure, Mr.
here.
Bright. My pleasure, Mr. Bright. My pleasure.
It's always fun to talk about spiritual stuff and especially interesting things like a lot of the stuff that's in the Urantia book is very interesting and very much food for thought and contemplation. So thanks, guys.